The holographic display shut down with a soft hum, leaving Commander Lyrelai standing alone in the dark briefing room of Coalition Station Nexus 7. The blue light from distant stars came through the large window, making strange shadows on the metal walls. Her pointed ears moved down slightly, showing her sadness. Behind her in the darkness came a low rumbling sound where Whisper, her dragon friend, could feel her pain. Lyrelai repeated the Admiral's final words to herself. Incompatible combat methodologies. That is what they always say. She spoke softly to the empty room while her violet eyes caught the starlight and seemed to glow. 17 different human military groups had looked at her application to help fight the Zarathi swarm. 17 times she had shown them what she could do. The ancient elf magic that worked together with advanced technology. The way Whisper could move through different dimensions during battle. Their mind connection that was better than any computer system humans had made. 17 times they had said no. She walked to the window and placed her hand on the cold glass. The space station orbited a gas giant planet with swirling clouds of orange and red. Below them, ships moved back and forth carrying supplies and soldiers to the war front. Everyone was busy fighting for survival. Everyone except her. The war was going badly for the humans. The Zarathi were like a plague of metal insects that ate entire star systems. Their ships were part machine and part living creature, and they adapted to every weapon used against them. Humanity was losing planet after planet. Yet even when facing total destruction, the human commanders would not accept what they could not understand, an elf woman from a lost colony who used technology that looked like magic. A dragon that broke all the rules of physics, too dangerous, they said, too unpredictable, too different. Lyrelai turned away from the window and walked across the empty briefing room. Her boots made no sound on the metal floor, a result of elvish training that went back thousands of years. In the corner of the room, tactical displays showed the current state of the war. Red dots for Zarathi-controlled systems, blue dots for human space. The red was spreading like spilled blood. She had been born on Thessera Prime, a world forgotten by star charts for over 500 years. Her people had developed along a different path than mainline humanity. They had kept the old ways, the connection to nature and life force itself, but they had also advanced, merging their natural gifts with technology in ways that seemed impossible. When the Zarathi found Thessera Prime, her people fought back. They lasted longer than most worlds, weeks instead of hours. But in the end, even elvish battle magic could not stop the swarm. Lyrelai had watched her home burn, watched the great tree cities turn to ash. She and Whisper were among the few who escaped. Now she wanted to help. She wanted to share what her people had learned in those final desperate battles. She knew secrets about the Zarathi that could save human lives, but the humans would not listen. Whisper emerged from the shadows, moving with liquid grace despite her size, no bigger than a large horse. She was nothing like the dragons from human stories. Her scales shifted color, constantly moving from deep purple to silver to black. Her eyes held intelligence that matched any human, and her bond with Lyrelai went deeper than mere friendship. The dragon made a soft chirping sound and pressed her head against Lyrelai's shoulder. It was a gesture of comfort and support. They had been together for 40 years, ever since Whisper had hatched and chosen the young elf as her partner. Through training and war, through loss and exile, they had never been apart. One more try, Lyrelai said, running her fingers along the smooth scales of Whisper's neck. The dragon's skin felt warm and alive, pulsing with inner fire. The 18th Fleet is our last option. If they reject us too, then we will have to find another way. Whisper made another sound, this one questioning. She could speak directly into Lyrelai's mind, but often chose these simple vocalizations instead. It was less tiring for both of them, I know. You are tired of this. Lyrelai answered the unspoken question. I am tired too. Tired of proving ourselves over and over. Tired of being judged as too strange or too risky. But what else can we do? The humans need our help, even if they do not know it. Yet she walked to the table where her personal items lay. Her armor was there, folded neatly. It looked like liquid metal that had been frozen mid-flow. The surface seemed to move and breathe even when completely still. This was Thessaran bioarmor, grown rather than built. It would stop energy weapons and kinetic rounds equally well while weighing almost nothing. Next to the armor was her weapon, a staff that could become a sword or a rifle, or a dozen other forms depending on need. The humans called it smart matter, but to her people it was simply the marriage of life and technology. The way things should be. Lyra Lay picked up a small hollow projector and activated it. An image appeared in the air showing a human woman in a captain's uniform, dark hair cut short, serious brown eyes, a face that had seen battle and made hard choices. The name below read, Captain Amy Chen, commanding officer of the battlecruiser. Defiance. This was her last chance. The 18th Fleet was known for taking risks, for thinking outside normal military doctrine. Captain Chen had a reputation for unconventional tactics. Maybe she would see past the surface differences. The door chimed and opened. A young human ensign entered looking nervous. He was obviously uncomfortable around non-humans and kept glancing at Whisper with barely hidden fear. Commander Lyra Lay, your transport to the 18th Fleet is ready to depart. The shuttle leaves in 30 minutes. Thank you, Ensign, Lyra Lay replied, keeping her voice neutral. She had learned not to take the fear personally. Humans feared what they did not understand. It was their nature. The ensign left quickly, clearly relieved to go. Lyra Lay sighed and began gathering her belongings. Everything she owned fit into 2 cases. A lifetime reduced to what she could carry. It was the life of a refugee, even one with combat skills that could turn the tide of war. Whisper stood and stretched her wings. The membrane between the wing bones caught the starlight and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. For a moment the dreary briefing room became beautiful. Then she folded her wings and was ready to go, as they prepared to leave. Lyra Lay thought about the 17 rejections. Each one had hurt more than the last. Each admiral or general had looked at her demonstrations and seen only alien strangeness instead of powerful ally. They could not see past. Their fear could not accept that different did not mean dangerous, but maybe the 18th time would be different. Maybe Captain Amy Chen would be the one to say yes. Maybe humanity would finally accept that survival meant embracing the unknown. Lyra Lay sealed her cases and stood straight. She was Commander Lyra Lay of the Thessaran Royal Guard, last of her kind. She was bonded to Whisper, a dragon of the void-touched line. She had fought the Zarathi and lived. She had knowledge and power that could save human lives. She would not give up together. Elf and dragon left the briefing room and headed for the shuttle bay. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, uncaring about the small struggles of the species below. But somewhere among those stars, the Zarathi were gathering, preparing their next assault. Time was running out. Captain Amy Chen stood on the bridge of the battlecruiser Defiance, watching the tactical display with growing worry. The holographic projection showed her fleet positions in blue and known Zarathi movements in angry red. The red was getting closer. Every day the 18th Fleet was down to 60% strength and reinforcements were still 3 weeks away. She had been awake for 20 hours straight, but sleep was a luxury she could not afford. The Zarathi probe attacks were increasing. They would send small, fast ships to test defenses, then vanish before the humans could respond. It was like being stalked by a predator that was learning your weaknesses. Amy rubbed her tired eyes and looked around the bridge. Her crew was the best in the fleet, but she could see the strain on their faces. They had lost too many friends, too many ships. Everyone knew the big attack was coming soon. The probes were just the Zarathi way of measuring their prey captain. "We have an unusual visitor," request announced Lieutenant Grace Murphy from the communication station. She was young but talented, with a gift for picking up patterns in seemingly random data. A Commander Lyra Lay of Thessara Prime, requesting permission to dock me, turned from the tactical display and walked to her command chair, Thessara Prime. The name was vaguely familiar. Pull up the file. The information appeared on her personal screen, and Amy felt her eyebrows rise. The combat record was impressive beyond belief. Single-handedly destroying a Zarathi harvester ship. rescuing 300 colonists from an overrun world, developing new shield frequencies that could potentially counter Zarathi adaptation. But what caught her attention most were the 17 rejection notices. 17. Different fleet commanders had turned this person away, and they rejected her because Amy asked, though. She suspected she already knew the answer. Unconventional methods. Captain replied. Grace. She is not entirely human. Amy read more. Of the file, Commander Lyrelai was an elf from a lost colony that had developed along different evolutionary lines. She commanded something called battle magic, which appeared to be a form of quantum manipulation through biological interfaces. She was bonded to a dragon, a creature that could phase through dimensions. The captain snorted. Neither are the Zarathi clear. Her for Docking Bay 3. Several of her bridge officers looked surprised. Commander Lisa Park, her weapons officer, spoke up. Captain, are you sure the previous 17 commanders all had concerns about what, Lisa? About working with someone different? About using methods we do not fully understand. Amy stood and faced her crew. Let me tell you what concerns me: the Zarathi, adapting to every weapon we throw at them. Our fleet getting weaker while they get stronger. Watching good people die because we are too proud to accept help. She paused and looked each officer in the eye. I would ally with the devil himself if it meant saving human lives. Clear her for docking. 20 minutes later, Amy stood in Docking Bay 3 with a small security detail. She had ordered them to keep their weapons holstered, but she knew they were nervous. Everyone had heard stories about elves and dragons, mostly from old Earth myths and entertainment. None of it was probably true, but fear did not need truth to spread. The fighter craft that entered the bay was like nothing Amy had ever seen. It flowed through the containment field, like liquid metal, then solidified into a sleek, predatory shape. The hull seemed to ripple and breathe as if it were alive rather than built. Thessaran technology was clearly centuries ahead in some areas. The canopy opened with no visible seam. Simply, a portion of the hull becoming transparent, then vanishing. Amy expected to see the pilot climb out. Instead, a dragon leaped onto the deck. Amy's hand moved toward her sidearm by instinct, but she forced it to stop. The dragon was beautiful in an alien, wayscales that shifted color like oil on water eyes that held obvious intelligence. Wings folded against a body built for both grace and power. Not the monster of legend, but something far more interesting. The dragon turned back to the fighter and extended one wing. A figure in form-fitting armor used the wing as a step to dismount. The movement was so smooth it looked rehearsed. Amy realized it probably was. This was a partnership measured in years, not days. Commander Lyrelai was not what Amy had expected. The elf was tall and athletic, with skin that seemed to hold trapped moonlight. Her hair was silver white despite a face that looked no older than 30. Her eyes were violet and seemed to see everything at once. The pointed ears were the most obvious difference, but far from the only one. Everything about her moved with a fluid grace that made humans look clumsy. Commander Lyrelai, said the elf. Her voice had a musical quality, but the military bearing was unmistakable. She offered a salute that was almost but not quite standard. Thank you for seeing me. Captain Chen, your reputation precedes you, Amy replied, returning the salute. She decided to be direct. That seemed to be working so far. I have read your file. Impressive. Does not begin to cover it. Yet 17 of your colleagues found reasons to refuse my aid. Amy studied her visitor. Where others had seen alien strangeness, she saw potential. The war had taught her hard lessons. Conventional thinking led to conventional casualties. Playing by the rules only worked when your enemy followed the same rules. Tell me, Amy said. What exactly can you do that has everyone so terrified? Lyrelai tilted her head slightly, considering the question. I can do things that should not be possible according to human science. I can teach your people to think in ways that will seem like madness until they work. I can show you how to fight an enemy that adapts by using weapons they cannot understand. She paused and ran one hand along the dragon's neck. The creature made a sound somewhere between a purr and a song. But mostly, Captain, I can help you win. Amy felt some of the bridge crew's tension ease behind her. Direct words honestly spoken went a long way toward building trust in. You have been offering this help for how long? Now 7 months, Lyra answered without hesitation. 7 months of demonstrations and rejections. 7 months of watching the war grow worse while I sat on the sidelines. Why keep trying? Why not go elsewhere? The elf smiled, and it transformed her face from beautiful to stunning. Because Captain, humans are dying. Zerathi are winning, and I have sworn an oath to stop them. Your species' rigid thinking frustrates me, but that does not change my duty. Amy made a decision. In her experience, the best choices were made quickly and stuck to. Welcome aboard the Defiance, Commander. We have much to discuss. Relief flickered across Lyra's features before her control reasserted itself. Thank you, Captain. You will not regret this. I had better not, Amy said, but she was smiling. The dragon. Your partner, I assume. Whisper. Lyra confirmed. We have been bonded for 40 years. She understands human speech perfectly and can communicate telepathically with me. She is quite friendly despite appearances, as if to prove the point. Whisper lowered her head and studied Amy with eyes that held surprising warmth. The captain had the strangest feeling she was being evaluated in return. Docking bay. 3 is yours. For as long as needed. Amy said, your fighter will be secure here. Quarters have been arranged on deck 7 unless you prefer to stay with your ship. Quarters will be fine. Lyra assured her. Whisper and I appreciate your trust. Amy turned to go then. Stop, trust is earned, Commander. But I am willing to give you the chance to earn it. We have a senior staff meeting at 0800 tomorrow. Be there. She left the docking bay with her security detail. Behind her, she could hear Lyra speaking to her dragon in a language that sounded like music. The words were incomprehensible, but the tone was universal relief and hope. As Amy returned to the bridge, she wondered if she had just made the best or worst decision of her career. But either way it was done. The 18th Fleet now had an elf commander and a dragon on their side. Time would tell if that was enough to turn the tide. The next morning, Amy assembled her senior staff in the main hangar bay of the Defiance. Word had spread through the ship about their unusual guests. The hangar was larger than required, with more crew members finding reasons to be working nearby. Everyone wanted to see the elf, and her dragon commander Lisa Park stood with her arms crossed, clearly skeptical. The weapons officer had voiced her concerns privately to Amy the night before, but had agreed to keep an open mind. Next to her chief, Engineer Tony Rodriguez checked his tablet, repeatedly recording everything. Science Officer Grace Murphy could barely contain her excitement, bouncing on her heels like a child. Easy, Grace, Amy said quietly. This is not a carnival show. Sorry, Captain, Grace replied. But her eyes never left the center of the hangar where Lyra stood waiting. The elf had changed from her arrival clothes into what could only be combat gear. But it was unlike any armor Amy had seen. The material flowed like liquid, mercury clinging to Lyra's form, yet somehow giving the impression of absolute protection. It seemed to shift between solid and liquid states, responding to movement. Beside her, Whisper sat perfectly still. The dragon had attracted the most stares. When they entered, maintenance crews working on fighters had stopped mid-task to watch her pass. Now she waited with patience that seemed almost unnatural for such a powerful creature. Thank you all for coming. Lyra began, her voice carrying easily across the hangar. The acoustics should have made that impossible, but the sound reached everyone clearly. I know you have concerns about my methods, about what I can offer your fleet. I hope this demonstration will answer some questions. She raised one hand, and the air around her began to shimmer. At first, Amy thought it was heat distortion, but then symbols appeared in the air. Not holograms, but actual bending of space itself. The symbols glowed with soft blue light rotating slowly around. Lyra Thesaurine battle magic. Lyra explained what you would call quantum manipulation through biological interfaces. My people developed this over thousands of years, learning to touch the fundamental forces of reality with our minds. Grace, Murphy gasped as her instruments went wild. Captain, I am reading massive quantum fluctuations, but they are perfectly controlled. This should not be possible with any technology we know. The symbols grew brighter and more complex, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly. Amy felt a strange pressure in her head, like trying to understand a concept just beyond her grasp. Your scientist would say, "This breaks the laws of physics," Lyreley continued. "But we simply use different laws, older laws that your species has forgotten." She gestured and the symbols vanished. Tony Rodriguez stepped forward. "Commander, that is impressive, but how does it help us fight the Zarathi?" "A fair question," Lyreley acknowledged. "Let me show you something more practical." She nodded to Whisper, who stood and stretched. The dragon was beautiful in motion, every movement flowing into the next. Then something impossible happened. Whisper split into 3 dragons. Amy blinked hard, but the image remained. 3 identical dragons stood where one had been a moment before. They moved independently, circling Lyreley like guards, phase shifting through dimensional barriers. Lyreley explained, "What you see are temporal echoes of Whisper existing in slightly different, dimensional phases. She can scout enemy positions through walls that exist in only 3 dimensions. She can attack from angles that your geometry says cannot exist." The 3 dragons merged back into one, and Amy heard several crew members exhale, breaths they had been holding. "But the most practical application," Lyreley said, "is this. A maintenance crew rolled in a decommissioned fighter drone, one scheduled for recycling. The drone was positioned 50 meters from Whisper, who turned to face. Your weapons work against Zarathi once, maybe twice," Lyreley said. "Then they adapt, they learn, they become immune, but they cannot adapt to something that operates outside their understanding." Whisper inhaled, and Amy expected to see fire emerge from the dragon's mouth. Instead, a stream of what looked like liquid starlight flowed from her jaws. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The stream hit the drone, and something extraordinary happened. The drone did not melt or explode. It simply ceased. Parts of it vanished as if they had never existed. The metal did not glow or deform, it just stopped being. The stream cut through the heavily armored hull like it was made of air. Grace was frantically checking her readings. "Captain, the drone is not being destroyed in any conventional sense. The molecular bonds are being undone at a quantum level. This is complete matter disruption." Lyreley walked over to the remains of the drone, half of it simply gone in a perfect arc. The edges where matter met nothingness were smooth as glass. Zarathi shields adapt to energy weapons, kinetic weapons, even antimatter, but they cannot adapt to ceasing to exist. Their biomechanical nature requires continuity of being. Whisper's breath. Weapon denies that continuity. Lisa Park stepped forward, her skepticism visibly wavering. "The tactical applications against capital ships are extensive." "Yes," Lyreley agreed, "but it requires coordination. Whisper and I fight as one mind in 2 bodies. We can teach your pilot similar techniques, not true telepathy, but enhanced battle coordination that will give you advantages." Amy noticed her crew leaning forward now, interested rather than wary. Even the maintenance workers had stopped pretending to work and were openly watching. "There is more," Lyreley said. She touched her armor and weapons materialized in her hands, a staff that glowed with inner light, a blade that seemed to cut the air itself. "These are not just weapons, but extensions of my will. They can become what I need them to become." The staff shifted, flowing into a rifle configuration, then a whip, then back to a staff. The transformations were seamless, taking less than a second each. "Show us combat scenarios," Amy ordered. "If we are going to integrate your abilities, we need to understand how you fight." Lyreley smiled. "For that, I need opponents." Training drones were brought in, a full squad of 12. Amy watched as Lyreley and Whisper took positions. The drones activated, their combat protocols surrounding the pair with military precision. The battle lasted 43 seconds. Lyreley moved like water, avoiding attacks that should have hit, dancing between laser fire that seemed to bend around her. Whisper phase shifted, constantly there and not there, attacking from impossible angles. The dragon's claws passed through drone shields like they were illusions, while Lyreley's weapons shifted forms to match each tactical need. When it ended, all 12 drones were disabled. None had landed a single hit. The hangar was silent. Amy could see her crew reassessing everything they thought they knew about combat. Lisa Park was the first to speak, Captain. If we could adapt even a fraction of these techniques, we could turn this war around. Amy finished. She walked over to Lyra Lee, who was not even breathing hard. How quickly can you begin training our people? Immediately, Lyra Lee replied. But Captain, there is something you must understand. This is not just about teaching techniques. It is about changing how your people think about reality itself. Some will not be able to accept it. Their minds will reject what seems impossible. Amy looked around at her crew. She saw fear, yes, but also hope. For the first time in months, she saw hope. Then we start with volunteers. Amy decided those willing to expand their thinking. Commander Lyra Lee, welcome to the 18th Fleet. As the demonstration ended and crews began to disperse, Amy noticed something. Numbers were already forming in her head, tactical applications suggesting themselves. If even half of what she had seen could be adapted to standard fleet operations, Captain Grace Murphy approached, holding her tablet. These readings are incredible. With your permission, I would like to work with Commander Lyra Lee to understand the science behind her abilities. And I want to understand those weapon configurations, Lisa Park added. If we could apply that transformation technology to ship systems. Amy smiled. It seemed her gamble was already paying off. The 18th Fleet had just gained capabilities no other human force possessed. Now they just had to survive long enough to use them. The Zarathi attack came 3 days later, just as Amy had predicted. The first warning came from long-range sensors showing massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. Amy was on the bridge when the alarms started their harsh wailing, cutting through the normal, quiet efficiency of the command center. Multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Grace Murphy announced from her science station. Reading 15 No 23 Zarathi vessels. Captain, we have a Devastator class. Among them, Amy felt her blood chill. Devastator class ships were twice the size of anything in the 18th Fleet. They were planet killers designed to crack worlds open and feast on the resources within. No human fleet had ever destroyed one. Without taking catastrophic losses, all hands to battle stations. Amy commanded, her voice steady despite the fear. Set condition. Red launch all fighters. Lyra Lee, are you ready? Ready. Captain, came the response through the comm system. Whisper and I are launching now. On the tactical display, Amy watched as fighters streamed from the Defiance and her sister ships. One icon stood out, moving unlike any other craft. Lyra Lee's Starweaver danced through space in patterns that defied physics, while the rest of the squadron struggled to keep up. The Zarathi ships finished their emergence from hyperspace and began their advance. They moved like a swarm of metal insects, smaller ships protecting the massive Devastator at their center. Energy readings spiked as they powered weapons. All ships defensive formation Alpha, Amy ordered. Keep the carriers protected and watch those flanks. The first exchange of fire lit space with deadly beauty. Laser beams and plasma bolts crossed the void while missiles traced orange lines toward their targets. The Zarathi shields absorbed the human attacks, adapting in real time. Just as Amy feared, their weapons were already becoming less effective. Zarathi fighters incoming. Lisa Park called out, entering defense. Grid range in 30 seconds. Amy watched Starweaver suddenly accelerate beyond what any fighter should achieve. The craft phase shifted, becoming translucent for a moment before solidifying behind the Zarathi fighter screen. Lyra Lee, what are you doing? Amy demanded. Trust me. Captain, came the calm reply. Starweaver fired, and its weapons were unlike anything Amy had seen. Beams of twisted space that made Zarathi shields simply stop working. Projectiles that passed through matter until they reached critical systems, then became solid again. The alien fighters tried to respond, but Lyra Lee was never where they aimed. Then Whisper separated from the fighter. Amy had not expected that the dragon flew free in the vacuum of space, her scales glowing with inner fire that had nothing to do with combustion, and she began to grow. What had been horse-sized expanded rapidly until Whisper rivaled a Corvette in scale. That is impossible. Tony Rodriguez breathed. No biological entity can survive in vacuum, much less grow like that. Yet Amy was watching it happen. Whisper swept through the Zarathi fighters like a force of nature. Her claws tore through shields and armor with equal ease. Her breath weapon unmade entire sections of enemy ships. The Zarathi tried to adapt, but how do you adapt to something that operates outside the laws of physics? The smaller Zarathi ships began to falter under the combined assault, but the Devastator continued its approach. Its massive weapons arrays began to glow with power that could crack a moon. All ships concentrate fire on the Devastator. Amy ordered, "Take down those shields." The 18th Fleet poured everything they had at the massive ship. Beams, missiles, kinetic rounds all struck the Devastator's shields and were absorbed. The ship did not even slow its advance. "Shields are adapting faster than we can modulate frequencies," Grace reported. "We are not getting through." Captain Amy gripped her command chair. This was how fleets died, unable to hurt the enemy while being slowly torn apart. "Lyrelei, can you get through those shields?" Amy asked. Already moving into position, Captain came the response. On the display, Starweaver began a run straight at the Devastator. It was suicide to approach a ship that size head-on. The point defense systems alone could shred 100 fighters. "What is she doing?" Lisa demanded. "She will be destroyed. Watch," Amy said, though she shared the concern. Starweaver reached the Devastator's shield perimeter and kept going. The fighter phase shifted, sliding between dimensions. The shields, designed to stop matter and energy in three-dimensional space, could not block something that existed partially elsewhere. Starweaver appeared inside the shield bubble mere meters from the Devastator's hull. "Now whisper," Lyrelei commanded over the open channel. The dragon had been waiting for this moment. She dove toward the Devastator, shrinking as she fell. By the time she reached the hull, she was small enough to enter through a weapon port. She vanished inside the massive ship. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. The Devastator continued its advance, weapons charging for a killing blow against the human fleet. Then explosions began to ripple across its surface. Internal detonations. Grace reported, ridding massive systems failures throughout the ship. Their main reactor is destabilizing inside the Devastator. Whisper was doing what she did best, being impossible. She phase shifted through bulkheads, appeared in critical system nodes, and unleashed her breath weapon. Components that took years to grow and adapt ceased to exist in seconds. The ship biological computer tried to respond, but it could not understand an attack from inside that defied physics. Lyrelei's fighter danced across the Devastator's hull, adding to the destruction. Her weapons carved through armor that should have been impenetrable, seeking and destroying critical systems with surgical precision. The Devastator's shields flickered and died. "All ships, fire everything," Amy commanded. "Now while they are vulnerable." The combined firepower of the 18th Fleet struck the unshielded Devastator. Explosions chained across its hull as weapons that had been useless moments before found their marks. The massive ship tried to turn to flee, but it was too late. A brilliant flash lit space as the Devastator's main reactor went critical. The ship did not explode so much as it came apart. Sections the size of buildings tumbled away, while secondary explosions consumed what remained. The remaining Zarathi ships paused. Their tactical net had been built around the Devastator, and without it they faltered. Some tried to flee while others pressed the attack with mechanical determination. "Do not let them escape." Amy ordered all ships pursue and destroy. The battle became a rout. Human fighters, emboldened by the impossible victory, pressed their attacks. Whisper emerged from the dying Devastator and grew to her war size again, sweeping through fleeing Zarathi ships with devastating effect. In 12 minutes it was over. The Zarathi force that should have crushed the 18th Fleet was nothing but expanding clouds of debris and cooling metal. Amy could hardly believe what she was seeing on the tactical display. Lyrelei returned to Defiance. Amy broadcast all fighters returned to base. As the adrenaline faded, Amy realized what they had just accomplished. They had destroyed a Devastator-class ship with minimal losses. It was not just a victory. It was a revolution in space combat. Grace was already analyzing the data. "Captain, the tactical implications of this are staggering. If we can replicate even part of what Lyrelei and Whisper just did, We can win this war. Lisa Park finished. There was awe in her voice for the first time since this started. We can actually win. Amy stood and looked around her bridge. The crew was celebrating with good reason. They had just done the impossible. Comm officer Amy called. Open a channel to Fleet Command. They need to know that the war just changed. As reports came in of destroyed Zarathi ships and minimal human casualties, Amy allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had taken a risk accepting Lyrelay when 17 others had refused. It was the best decision she had ever made. 6 months later, Admiral Amy Chen stood before the Coalition Defense Council in the Grand Assembly Hall on Earth. The room was filled with the highest-ranking military officials from across human space. Behind her, Lyrelay waited in full-dress uniform, while Whisper perched on her shoulder in compact form. The war had changed completely in those 6 months. What had been a desperate retreat was now a steady advance. The Zarathi were falling back on multiple fronts, their adaptation abilities useless. Against Thessaran combat methods, Admiral Chen. The Council President began. We have read your reports, but we would like to hear directly from you. How has one non-human soldier made such a difference? Amy activated the holographic display showing battle, statistics, and fleet movements. The integration of Thessaran combat methods has exceeded all projections, she reported. Commander Lyralei's unit, now designated Dragon Squadron, has achieved a 94% mission success. Rate murmurs ran through the Council. These were numbers unheard of in the war against the Zarathi more. Importantly, Amy continued. Her presence has attracted other non-human allies who previously believed humanity too rigid to accept their aid. We now have 3 Altarian, Fleet Wings, and a full Centauri battle group fighting alongside us. The display changed, showing images of various non-human soldiers training with human forces. Each species brought unique abilities and perspectives that the Zarathi could not counter. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Amy recognized them as the admirals and generals who had rejected Lyrelay 17 times. They had fought against this change every step of the way. Admiral Patterson, one of the most vocal critics, raised his hand. These alien methods go against centuries of human military doctrine. How can we trust forces we do not understand? Amy had expected this question. Before I answer, let me show you something. The display shifted to show a recording from the Battle of Kepler Station. A Zarathi dreadnought 3 times the size of any human ship bore down on a refugee convoy. 30,000 civilians, mostly children, were minutes from death. Then Dragon Squadron arrived. The recording showed Lyrelay and her hand-picked pilots performing maneuvers that bent reality fighters' phase, shifting through attacks that should have killed them. Weapons that struck from dimensions the Zarathi could not perceive. And at the center of it all, Whisper in her, war form tearing through enemy ships like paper. The dreadnought died in 4 minutes, the refugees lived. Amy let the recording end before speaking. Admiral Patterson, those 30,000 civilians are alive because we embraced methods we did not fully understand. They are alive because one soldier refused to give up after 17 rejections. She looked at each council member in turn. What we have learned is that victory does not come from conformity. It comes from embracing what makes us different, what makes us stronger together. Then apart, Council President Martinez leaned forward. And you believe this approach should be expanded across all fleets? I do not believe it. Amy said firmly. I know it. The evidence is undeniable. Fleets that have integrated non-human fighters and Thessaran methods show 70% better survival rates. Zarathi adaptation becomes meaningless when faced with abilities that operate outside their understanding. Another council member spoke up. There are concerns about human soldiers learning these alien techniques. Reports suggest some find the training mentally challenging. Amy nodded. That is true. Not everyone can accept concepts that challenge their view of reality. But for those who can, the results speak for themselves. We have human pilots beginning to use dimensional thinking in combat, human gunners achieving accuracy rates that should be impossible. It turns out human potential was always greater than we believed. We just needed someone to show us how to unlock it. The discussion continued for another hour. Statistics were presented. Arguments were made. But in the end, the evidence was overwhelming. The Council voted to expand the integration program across all human fleets. After the briefing, Amy found Lyrelei on the observation deck of the Orbital Command Center Earth, hung below them blue and beautiful. The cradle of humanity, no longer under immediate threat of extinction. Any regrets, Amy asked, joining her friend at the viewport. Lyrelei smiled, her violet eyes reflecting Earthlight. Only that it took 18 tries to find someone who could see past the surface. Their loss was my gain, Amy said, and meant it. The 18th Fleet would have been destroyed without you. Earth might have fallen. Humanity might have ended. Perhaps Lyrelei turned from the view to face her. But I think it was meant to happen this way. The 17 rejections led me to you and you. She paused, choosing her words. You did not just accept what I could do, you accepted who I am. The observation deck door opened and several officers entered. They were part of the new mixed units. Humans and non-humans training together. One young pilot approached nervously, Commander Lyrelei. She said, I wanted to thank you. The dimensional phase training saved my life yesterday. Lyrelei smiled warmly. You saved your own life, Lieutenant. I merely showed you what was possible. After the officers left, Amy chuckled. You know what the funny thing is? They all said you were too different. Every one of those 17 commanders insisted you would not fit in. But when it mattered, when humanity's survival was on the line, different was exactly what we needed. Whisper-chirped agreement. The sound was surprisingly musical from a creature who could unmake matter with her breath. The small dragon nuzzled against Lyrelei's neck, showing affection. Amy thought back to that first meeting in the docking bay. The fear and uncertainty her crew had shown. The doubts she herself had harbored. Now Lyrelei was not just accepted but celebrated. Dragon Squadron had become legendary across human space, but more than military victory, they had achieved something greater. Humanity had learned to embrace the unknown, to find strength in diversity. The rigid thinking that had nearly doomed them was giving way to new possibilities. A young ensign appeared at the door. Admiral Captain, the Altarian delegation has arrived for the joint training exercise. Amy and Lyrelei exchanged, knowing looks. Another species ready to join the alliance. Another set of abilities. The Zarathi could not counter. We should go, Amy said. The future is waiting. As they walked toward the door, Lyrelei paused. You know, Amy, after all this time, after everything we have accomplished together, there is something I never told you. Amy raised an eyebrow. Oh, when I first arrived at Coalition Station for my 18th attempt, I had decided it would be my last. If you had rejected me, I was going to leave human space, forever. Find some quiet world and live out my days in peace. And now, Amy asked, though she suspected the answer. Now Lyrelei looked back at Earth, shining in the void. Now I cannot imagine being anywhere else. This is my home. These are my people. Human, elf dragon, and all the others standing together as one. They left the observation deck, walking side by side toward a future that had once seemed impossible. The war continued among the stars, but for the first time, victory was not just possible, but inevitable, because humanity had finally learned the greatest lesson of all. Strength did not come from similarity. It came from embracing the perfect differences that made them whole. The 18th human had said, "You are perfect," and in doing so, had saved them all.